It is election day in America, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you align with, everyone is stressed out today and scared. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but we're going to get into some other things first. It's going to be sort of a smorgasbord of an episode today. It will hopefully make sense when I'm finished with it. So I've had on my mind a lot recently my coming out of the broom closet, and I believe I did an episode on it last year, maybe. But October 24th, 2020, I came out as a witch. And ironically, coming out as bisexual the next year was a lot less dramatic than coming out as a witch. But I made a public declaration because I was kind of being, I wasn't really talking about it. I was just kind of keeping to myself. I wasn't discussing with people that I had really left the church. No one really noticed until about 6 months in, which was September, that I wasn't going to church anymore, or bothered to check on me or anything. And so, COVID kind of helped that. But I was kind of dodging phone calls and avoiding questions. And I finally was just like, fuck it. I'm just gonna come out publicly on my Facebook and say what's going on and put an end to all these questions. And I lost a lot of friends. I had some really hateful comments. And then it was over. I mean, it was like less than a week of drama. And then I didn't have to deal with the questions anymore. And it's kind of funny because so many things that we have built up in our mind as absolutely terrifying and scary, when they actually happen, oftentimes turn out to be not as terrifying as we've built them up to be in our mind. But I've reflected a lot recently over my spiritual journey over the last 4 years and how different I am now than I was then in so many ways, and more stable in more ways than one, and less driven by fear. And it's so interesting to me, as someone who was raised in the church, to look back on the teachings that I was brought up with and some of the things people talked about a lot. I remember so many people pointing out how many times the Bible says, fear not. And I don't remember the number, but it's a lot. And it was just this constant discussion of, we're not supposed to be afraid. We're not supposed to be afraid. But the actual putting into practice and everything else that they taught was, we should be afraid, especially when it came to politics. Especially when it came to politics. I remember when Barack Obama first ran for office, he was essentially, called the Antichrist. And everyone thought that, we were going to suddenly become a Muslim country and it was going to be illegal to be a Christian and conservatives weren't going to be allowed to be, open about their politics anymore. And it was just going to be just this mass, just chaos and persecution. And none of that happened. None of it happened. There was this horrible, just fear that suddenly everything was going to be drastically awful. And this, as someone who has not been involved in politics for a very long time, and as someone who is somewhat freshly out of evangelical indoctrination, looking at the political climate of today, regardless of what side you're on, step away and be realistic. It's terrifying to see things like Project 2025 and these plans that would seem to disenfranchise about half of the population. And it's terrifying to hear the rhetoric that Donald Trump and JD Vance spout. But step outside of it for a moment and be realistic. The last, I don't know how many elections, in my lifetime as long as I have been voting, the presidential elections are divided about 50-50. It is a narrow margin that anyone wins by. What that should tell you that as many people as are against you, whatever your particular candidate or ideology is, are with you. We're squeaking by based on swing states, whoever it is. The sheer numbers of that says it's going to be difficult to subjugate the opposing ideology. Not impossible, not stupid. I know things have happened in other countries. However, if you're going to disenfranchise and subjugate half of the population, you're in for a bad time and you're in for a very short reign of terror. Very short. You can't sustain that for very long. You can't. It's statistically impossible. And it's so hilarious to me as I look back. I started a career in politics and left it to start a career in healthcare because I didn't want anything to do with politics, and I feel like I have to deal with more politics working in healthcare than I ever did when I actually worked in politics. It affects every aspect of my job and my career, and I do mean every aspect. And I am sure that my career is not unique in that. And I think it's interesting when we think we can remove ourselves from politics as if it doesn't affect us. When the reality is, it affects our daily lives constantly. I was thinking today about the perception I had of nurses before I was a nurse, when I was a CNA and a CNA student and a nursing student, and I always thought they were just like this weird kind of clique that they treated everyone who wasn't a nurse as an outsider. Like, you won't get it until you're a nurse. You don't understand this because you don't do our job. And I thought it was kind of elitist, and I kind of looked down on that attitude a lot until I went through nursing school and became a nurse, and then I got it. And I've noticed more than once, it has occurred to me more than once, that nurses have an attitude very similar to people in the military, in that you wouldn't get it if you hadn't been through it. And there's a bond between nurses that others just don't get. And I was thinking about it today, that correlation and that similarity. You might hear my cat because she's decided she wants to come over here and hop up in my lap. That a lot of healthcare has the developments that have happened, things that we've changed as far as treatments or things we know about the human body or ways that we deal with certain disease processes or injuries or whatever. A lot of those developments have come about because of war. And there's a very strong, I don't want to say correlation, but a tie between healthcare and the military because of that. But I think that you see a lot of people in healthcare, and at least in my experience, a lot who have been in the military or who are in the military, who believe in what they're doing, but don't believe that they are empowered to execute it in the way that they should be able to, or that they are supported by their superiors to do what needs to be done, or that maybe they are doing more harm than good in some situations, and they feel powerless to change the trajectory. And I want to be careful in how I say this, but I think that there comes a time sometimes when you have to abandon ship because the ship is going the wrong way and there's no way to turn it around. But I don't know. I want to believe it's not time to abandon ship yet. I think the ship can be turned around. I hope that the ship can be turned around. I want to believe that the ship can be turned around. But regardless of any of that, and regardless of what the results of today's election are, I think there's something very important to remember, and I've talked about it a lot in several recent episodes. We are terrible in this country about othering. It doesn't matter if it's racism or homophobia or classism or political ideology, judgment. We're horrible to go, they're different, so I'm not gonna like them. I'm gonna judge them. I'm gonna dehumanize them and keep myself separate from them. And I'm going to call out, and I'm sure people are going to be angry at me for this. Those of you who are voting blue, the worst about this. Hear me out. It is very easy to say anyone who votes for Donald Trump hates me or hates people I love. And so I don't want anything to do with them. They're terrible people. That is a very easy statement to make. And it's lazy. And it is lacking in the love that you say you want them to have. And let me be very clear when I say love. I am talking about radical love. I am talking about unconditional love. I am talking about pure divine love. I am not talking about cuddly warm feelings. And that kind of love calls people to their highest self. It is not a love that makes excuses. It is a love that meets people where they are. And if you have not listened to this narcissistic sociopath spouting off fear mongering for however long he's been on the campaign trail and haven't thought that is a narcissistic sociopath, then you haven't been listening, number one. But number two, you have not stopped to consider what kind of people are susceptible to narcissistic abuse. And I did say abuse because gaslighting and manipulation is abuse. And you can make all the excuses you want about the safety of people, but if you are in danger of losing your home or your business, or you think you're in danger of losing your livelihood, your way of life, you're vulnerable and you're scared. And narcissistic people prey on that. Narcissistic people prey on scared people. And if you have not once stopped to consider that perhaps the people who are so adamantly following Donald J. Trump are scared, then you are not the empathetic person you think you are. Everything that I have mentioned, racism, homophobia, all of these things, they are rooted in fear. Different types of fears for different types of people, but they are all rooted in fear. And that's not to say, oh, they just need a hug and everything will be fine. No, some of them needed a very intense wake-up call. Some of them need some very strong words. Some of them need no contact, as we do with narcissistic people. Some of them like him because he's just like them. There is too great of a following for it to be an entire following of narcissists. There aren't that many narcissists in the world. Look at the statistics. And I have seen from the side of those voting blue much quicker readiness to other those who are voting different than I have from the other side. Now, they've certainly got their fair share of othering, but I have not seen as much from them saying, I'm not even going to be friends with you anymore if you vote the other way. And that's not to say that I don't understand where people are coming from. I do. Say, well, if you're going to vote for somebody like that, you're voting for somebody who hates me, which means you're okay with me being hated. You're okay with me not being safe. voting is so much more complex than that. And breaking it down to that narrow of a level gets us nowhere in ending the divisiveness in this country. We have been so divided for so long. It is a constant there, them on that side, them on that side, those people over there. Stop. It doesn't stop until it stops with you. You have to be the one to stop it in your circle. And you can argue till you're blue in the face about their politics. And it's not about opinions, it's about morals and everything. Sure, it is. Okay. It is for them too. It is for them too. I've lived on that side. I was on that side. I know how they think. I know the fear that they have right now. I remember being absolutely terrified when Barack Obama was elected president that I was going to have to be put in jail at some point for being a Christian. I'm legit sick to my stomach, could barely function, terrified. Don't pretend you understand people who you won't get to know. I am not an evangelical, conservative, right wing extremist anymore because there were people who were compassionate enough to gently love me and educate me until I was able to come to my senses and think for myself outside of my indoctrination and brainwashing. If you are not willing to be that person for somebody else, ask yourself how committed you really are to this country being better. Because it's 50% of the population ish. At least 50% of those that vote that support him. If you're not willing to talk to your neighbors who vote differently than you because they vote differently than you, are you really that different? And nobody likes to hear that because, well, I don't hate people for their skin color or for their sexuality. No, you just hate them for how they vote. You just hate them for how they vote. You can say, oh, because it's a moral issue. Abortion is a moral issue for the majority of right-wing evangelicals. And they don't look at it like pro-choice people look at it. They don't look at it as, well, it's a woman's body. They look at it as murder. They legitimately look at it as murder. I remember, I was one of them. It's not about her body, it's about her killing an innocent child. And they are extremely adamant that that is the most important issue. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You have more in common with your neighbor who votes differently than you do with the candidate who you voted for. And people don't like to hear that, but it's true. As long as the political machine in Washington, D.C., or wherever your state capital is, can keep you believing that the people who voted for the other candidate are your enemy, they will continue taking our rights away. They will continue taking our money away. They will continue getting richer and lining the pockets of those who are already rich. We will continue to lose our way of life because you're too stubborn to talk to your neighbor and come to an understanding with them. We are too hard-headed and too proud and too self-righteous to talk to people who are different than us. And we stand on our self-righteous moral high ground saying it's because of their bad morals, while they're saying the exact same thing about us. Whoever wins the election today, tomorrow, you're still going to have the same neighbors. You're still going to have the same coworkers. There's still going to be the same people that you see at the grocery store and the gas station all the time. The people in your social circles, the waitress at the restaurant you love to go to, the bartender at your favorite bar you go to on the weekends. That's not going to change based on an election. We spend way too much energy putting politicians up as idols and decide to make them rivals with the other religion. If you are only a good person to the people who think like you, are you really a good person? If you only extend empathy and compassion and understanding to people who vote like you, are you really that empathetic and compassionate and understanding? There are a lot of things that may happen after this election, and if Donald Trump gets elected, I think there are some terrifying things coming down the pike. And if he does not get elected, I foresee another January 6th event happening. So, regardless of the outcome tonight, I foresee problems coming down the road. But the bigger problem is the problem that has persisted in this country for generations. And that's that we just don't know how to get along with people who are different than us. And it's childish. It's immoral. And it is the opposite of love. And it's whether you're a right-wing evangelical who claims to follow Christ and is unloving toward everyone who Christ loved, or you're a bleeding heart liberal and you only love other bleeding heart liberals, you're both hypocrites. The only answer to finish changing our country is love. We have got to stop fighting with our neighbors constantly. I'm committing to do it for myself as much as that I can in my corner of the world where I am. Will you join me? There is no revolution so radical as love. Think about it. And join me next time on the podcast as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress.